Testimony is underway in the third week of the criminal hush money trial involving former President Donald Trump. Today, the judge in the case held Trump in contempt of court for violating a gag order. Judge Juan Merchan says Trump violated the order not one, but 9 times, and fined him, $1,000 each, total of $9,000. CBS News correspondent Errol Barnett is following this for us outside the courthouse in Manhattan. Errol, you've been there day in and day out. Talk to us about this decision today. This is new news this morning, and the warning to Trump that it's not just about paying fines. He could end up in jail for this.
That's exactly right, Lilia. Judge Juan Merchan now instituting some level of punishment to former President Donald Trump for what he says is a clear violation of 9 instances of the judge's gag order. And as a result, the former president, will pay $1,000 per violation. And he has apparently until 2:15 Eastern to remove the corresponding Truth Social posts and remarks from his campaign 2024.
Okay, so I need you to understand just how unprecedented and absolutely insane what just happened in that courtroom really is. Donald Trump, a former president of the United States, someone who held the highest office in the land, reportedly threatened a federal judge during a hearing after losing control under cross-examination and watching his legal defense get completely demolished. We're not talking about Trump getting a little heated or showing frustration. We're talking about direct threats, veiled warnings about consequences, questioning the judge's impartiality in ways that caused actual alarm among court officers and security personnel. This is the kind of behavior that would get a regular person immediately hauled out of the courtroom in handcuffs and thrown in jail for contempt. But because it's Trump, because of who he is and the circus that surrounds everything he does, we're instead watching this play out as yet another chapter in what's becoming the most spectacular legal meltdown in modern American political history. Multiple eyewitnesses and court reporters are confirming that Trump absolutely exploded when the judge handed down rulings that struck key elements of his defense and authorized further criminal investigation. The scene inside that courtroom must have been absolutely wild. Lawyers scrambling, security moving into position, the judge trying to maintain order while Trump is apparently losing his mind and making threats. And here's what makes this so incredibly dangerous for Trump. Threatening a federal judge isn't just bad optics or poor strategy. It's potentially criminal behavior that could result in contempt charges, additional criminal counts, heightened sentencing if he's convicted of anything, and basically guarantees that every judge who deals with Trump's cases going forward is going to be watching him like a hawk, waiting for any excuse to throw the book at him. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
Be inside the lines of what the court will allow. He cannot intimidate witnesses or jurors in this case. No defendant can. And there's also one other aspect of the judge's order. Judge Juan Merchan also writes that the defendant is hereby warned by the court it will not tolerate continued willful violations of its lawful orders, and that if necessary and appropriate under the circumstances, it will impose an incarceratory punishment. So that is the threat of jail time to Trump if he continues to violate the gag orders. Now, for those keeping track at home, we have 9 violations of what the prosecution said were 10 violations, but last week they brought forth another 4. The judge is expected to hold a hearing on that decision on Thursday morning. So we're not out of the woods yet as far as Donald Trump's behavior as a defendant in this criminal case.
Well, let's get back to the trial now, Errol. The court also heard testimony today again from a bank executive, Guy Farrow. Why is he there? What did he have to say?
Well, if you remember, last week's star witness was David Pecker, former publisher of the National Enquirer, who says he was an admirer and a friend of Trump's, and he described the relationship of amplifying positive stories, suppressing negative stories. Now, additional witnesses have backed up some...
Now let's talk about what led up to this explosion, because Trump didn't just randomly decide to threaten a judge for no reason. This came after what's being described as a brutal hearing where Trump's legal team got absolutely destroyed and the judge made rulings that fundamentally undermine Trump's entire defense strategy. We're talking about a situation where Trump's lawyers were already struggling, already facing an uphill battle, and then the judge just systematically dismantled every argument they were making. The ruling authorized further criminal investigation into areas that Trump desperately wanted to keep hidden. It struck down legal protections that Trump's team was counting on to block evidence and testimony. It basically left Trump exposed in ways that his attorneys warned him could happen, but that he probably didn't really believe would actually occur. And Trump, who spent his entire life being able to bully, threaten, and intimidate his way out of problems, apparently couldn't handle the reality that a federal judge wasn't going to be intimidated or influenced by his usual tactics. So instead of maintaining composure like any reasonable person would in a courtroom setting, instead of letting his lawyers handle the situation professionally, Trump decided to make everything infinitely worse by directly confronting the judge with threats and accusations. The lack of self-control, the complete inability to read the room and understand that threatening a federal judge is probably the worst possible thing you could do in this situation. It's genuinely stunning to watch someone with Trump's experience make such a catastrophically bad decision. Here's what makes this situation even more wild. Even Trump's own attorneys and closest allies are reportedly stunned and panicked by what happened. These are people who've been defending Trump through everything, who've seen him at his worst, who thought they understood how he operates under pressure. And even they're describing panic in Trump's camp after this courtroom incident. That tells you everything you need to know about how serious this is. When your own lawyers are freaking out about your behavior, when your political allies are trying to figure out how to distance themselves from what you just did, when even the people whose job it is to make you look good are struggling to spin this in any positive way, you've crossed a line that probably shouldn't have been crossed. Legal experts across the political spectrum are saying that threats against the judiciary are nearly unheard of among former presidents, that this kind of conduct invites immediate and severe consequences from the justice system. We're talking about potential contempt charges that could be filed almost immediately. We're talking about restrictions on Trump's ability to appear in court or speak about ongoing cases. We're talking about judges in other cases looking at this behavior and deciding they need to be much stricter with Trump, because clearly he doesn't respect the judicial process. The ripple effects from this one incident could make every single legal battle Trump is fighting significantly harder to win. The security response alone tells you how seriously this threat was taken by court officials. They heightened security around the courthouse. They provided additional protection for the judge. These aren't precautions you take because someone got a little upset. These are measures you implement when there's a genuine concern about potential violence or intimidation. Think about what that means. A former president of the United States made threats serious enough that federal marshals and court security had to take action to protect a sitting federal judge. That's banana republic stuff. That's the kind of thing you expect to see in countries with collapsing rule of law, not in the United States. And yet here we are, watching it unfold in real time while Trump's political empire crumbles around him and his legal situation gets worse by the day. The judge actually admonished Trump during the hearing, warned his legal team about contempt and obstruction, tried to restore order to proceedings that had completely gone off the rails, and Trump's response to being warned about his behavior was apparently to double down with more threats and accusations about unfair treatment. It's like watching someone dig their own grave deeper and deeper while everyone around them is screaming to stop digging. The self-destructive nature of this behavior is almost hard to comprehend unless you understand that Trump has spent his entire life never really facing consequences for his actions, never having to back down or submit to authority, never accepting that there are institutions more powerful than he is. That mindset has finally run headlong into the federal judiciary, and the collision is absolutely spectacular to witness. Let's break down exactly what happened during this hearing and why the judge's rulings were so devastating to Trump's legal position. According to reports, this was supposed to be a routine hearing on evidentiary matters and procedural issues, the kind of thing that usually doesn't generate much attention or drama. But it turned into a complete disaster for Trump's defense team as the judge systematically rejected their arguments and issued rulings that strike at the heart of their legal strategy. The judge authorized further criminal investigation into areas that Trump has fought tooth and nail to keep secret, potentially including financial records, communications about classified documents, and interactions related to January 6th and election interference allegations. This is exactly what Trump's lawyers have been trying to prevent, because they know that deeper investigation is going to uncover evidence that makes their job defending him exponentially harder. The judge also struck key elements of Trump's defense. which suggests that arguments Trump was counting on to either dismiss charges or create reasonable doubt with a jury have been ruled inadmissible or legally insufficient. When your defense strategy gets gutted by pretrial rulings, you're in serious trouble because it limits your options at trial and makes conviction much more likely. Trump apparently watched this happening in real time and realized just how bad his situation was becoming, which triggered the outburst that's now dominating headlines and making everything worse. The specific nature of Trump's threats and accusations is crucial to understanding why this incident is so serious. According to eyewitnesses, Trump directly questioned the judge's impartiality and warned of consequences if rulings continued to go against him. Let's unpack what that means. Questioning a judge's impartiality in open court isn't just disrespectful. It's an attack on the legitimacy of the entire judicial process and can be grounds for contempt. Every judge has to maintain the appearance of fairness and impartiality to preserve public confidence in the justice system. When a defendant stands up and essentially accuses the judge of bias or corruption, that's not protected speech. That's interference with the administration of justice. The warning about consequences is even more serious because it could be interpreted as an implicit threat of violence, retaliation, or intimidation. Federal judges are protected by law from threats and intimidation, specifically because the justice system cannot function if judges are afraid to make decisions based on law and evidence. Trump's behavior crossed that line in a way that's going to have immediate legal ramifications. Legal scholars are already discussing potential contempt charges, which could be filed as either civil or criminal contempt depending on how prosecutors and the judge want to proceed. Civil contempt is designed to compel compliance with court orders, while criminal contempt is designed to punish behavior that obstructs justice or shows disrespect for the court. Trump's conduct could easily justify criminal contempt charges, which would add yet another legal problem to his already overwhelming list of legal battles. The reaction from Trump's own attorneys during this incident tells you how unexpected and problematic his outburst was. These are experienced lawyers who've been through high-pressure situations before, who understand courtroom decorum and the importance of maintaining professional composure. And even they were apparently caught off guard by Trump's decision to directly confront the judge with threats and accusations. You can imagine the scene. Trump's lawyers probably trying to calm him down, trying to redirect the conversation back to legal arguments, trying to minimize the damage while simultaneously processing the fact that their client just made their jobs infinitely harder. Because here's the thing about representing someone who threatens a judge. Every other judge who touches any of Trump's cases is now going to know about this incident. They're going to be on high alert for any similar behavior. They're going to be less inclined to give Trump the benefit of the doubt on procedural matters. They're going to be more willing to impose strict conditions and sanctions because Trump has demonstrated that he doesn't respect the judicial process. Trump's lawyers are probably having emergency meetings right now trying to figure out how to walk back the damage, how to prevent contempt charges, how to convince other judges that this was an isolated incident that won't be repeated. But the reality is that you can't unring this bell. The threat happened. It's been documented by court reporters and witnessed by multiple people. And it's now part of the permanent record that will follow Trump through every legal proceeding going forward. Let's talk about the broader legal implications of this incident. Beyond just the immediate contempt issues, Trump is facing criminal charges in multiple jurisdictions, civil lawsuits on numerous fronts, and ongoing investigations that could result in additional charges. Every single one of these legal matters is now potentially impacted by what happened in that courtroom. Prosecutors who might have been willing to negotiate plea deals or reduce charges are going to look at this incident and decide that Trump isn't someone who can be trusted to comply with any agreement. Judges who might have been inclined to show leniency or give Trump the benefit of the doubt on evidentiary disputes are going to be much more strict because threatening a federal judge demonstrates contempt for the entire system. Juries who might have been open to Trump's arguments about persecution or unfair treatment are going to hear about this incident and potentially view him less sympathetically. The sentencing implications are particularly serious. If Trump gets convicted of any criminal charges, the judge handling sentencing is absolutely going to consider his conduct toward the judiciary when determining an appropriate punishment. Threatening a federal judge is exactly the kind of aggravating factor that results in harsher sentences because it demonstrates lack of remorse, continued danger to the community, and unwillingness to accept responsibility. Trump's lawyers have probably been telling him for months that he needs to show respect for the legal process, needs to appear contrite and cooperative, needs to avoid any behavior that could be seen as obstruction or intimidation. And Trump apparently just threw all of that advice out the window in one moment of rage. The political fallout from this incident is going to be massive. and will likely accelerate the collapse of Trump's remaining support that we've been discussing in previous coverage. Republican allies who were already wavering about whether to continue defending Trump now have to decide if they want to be associated with someone who threatens federal judges. That's a really tough sell to moderate voters and to anyone who cares about rule of law and respect for institutions. Even hardline MAGA supporters might start questioning whether Trump's behavior has crossed lines that are indefensible. The optics of a former president threatening a judge are just terrible from every possible angle, and it makes Trump look unhinged, vindictive, and dangerous. It reinforces every negative narrative about Trump being a threat to democratic norms and institutions. It gives Democrats ammunition to argue that Trump is unfit for office and represents a danger to the constitutional order. Republican congressional leaders who are already dealing with internal party warfare and mass defections now have to answer questions about whether they condemn Trump's threats against the judiciary. That's a no-win situation. If they condemn Trump, they anger the base and invite primary challenges, but if they defend or excuse his behavior, they look like they're okay with threatening judges, which is politically toxic. The incident also undermines any remaining argument that Trump's legal troubles are just politically motivated persecution. When you're threatening judges and losing control in courtrooms, it's pretty hard to maintain that you're just an innocent victim of a corrupt system targeting you unfairly. So where does this leave us in terms of Trump's overall legal situation and political prospects? The short answer is that things just got exponentially worse in ways that are going to be really difficult to recover from. Trump was already facing an uphill battle on multiple legal fronts, with courts stripping away protections, investigations accelerating, and his political support evaporating. Now he's added threatening a federal judge to the list of problems that his legal team has to manage. The immediate concern is whether contempt charges get filed and how quickly that happens. Contempt of court can be charged and adjudicated very quickly. We could literally see formal charges within days if prosecutors and the judge decide to move forward. And contempt is one of those charges where the normal rules about burden of proof don't really apply in the same way. If the judge witnessed the threatening behavior firsthand, if it's documented in the court record, proving contempt is relatively straightforward. Trump's usual strategy of delay and obstruction doesn't work as well with contempt because judges have broad authority to impose immediate sanctions, including fines and even jail time for particularly egregious conduct. The prospect of Trump being held in contempt and potentially jailed, even briefly, is something that his legal team has to be absolutely terrified about because of how it would look and the precedent it would set. The restrictions that could be imposed on Trump as a result of this incident are potentially severe and could impact his ability to defend himself in other cases. Judges have the authority to impose gag orders, to restrict defendants from attending certain hearings, to require that any future court appearances happen via video conference rather than in person. Trump thrives on being physically present, on being able to use his personality and presence to influence situations. If judges start restricting his ability to appear in court, if they impose strict gag orders that prevent him from talking about cases or judges, that fundamentally changes the dynamics of how Trump operates. He's always relied on being able to shape public perception through media appearances and public statements, on being able to intimidate and pressure through his large platform. Losing that ability would be a massive blow to his strategy. And here's the thing. After threatening one federal judge, other judges are going to be much more willing to impose these kinds of restrictions because they have a legitimate basis to believe Trump poses a risk of intimidation or obstruction. Every judge in every Trump case is now on notice that he's capable of this kind of behavior, which gives them legal justification to implement protective measures that limit Trump's ability to influence proceedings. The impact on public and legal perceptions cannot be overstated. We're watching in real time as the image of Trump transforms from former president and political leader to someone who's genuinely unhinged and dangerous. Threatening a federal judge is behavior that even Trump's most ardent supporters are going to have trouble defending. It's one thing to rail against the system, to claim persecution, to argue that investigations are politically motivated. It's another thing entirely to directly threaten the people who are supposed to be impartially administering justice. That crosses a line that most Americans, regardless of their political views, recognize as unacceptable and potentially criminal. Legal experts who've been following Trump's cases are saying this incident is a watershed moment that changes how everyone involved in these prosecutions is going to approach Trump going forward. Prosecutors are going to be less willing to negotiate or show flexibility. Judges are going to be more strict about enforcing rules and imposing sanctions. Even Trump's own lawyers are going to be more cautious about the advice they give and the strategies they pursue because they now know their client is capable of completely undermining their work with impulsive outbursts. The professional reputation of lawyers associated with Trump's defense is on the line, and continuing to represent someone who threatens judges is going to make it harder for them to be taken seriously in other cases. Let's talk about how this incident fits into the broader narrative of Trump's declining power and influence that we've been tracking. Just weeks ago, Trump was still able to command loyalty from significant portions of the Republican Party, still had allies willing to defend him publicly, still had enough political capital to shape party strategy and messaging. But the cascading series of defeats, Supreme Court losses, GOP defections, Marjorie Taylor Greene's resignation, party civil war, and now this courtroom meltdown has created a narrative of complete collapse that's becoming undeniable. Each incident reinforces the perception that Trump is losing control, that his usual tactics aren't working anymore, that the walls are closing in from every direction. The threatening of a federal judge is going to be seen as an act of desperation by someone who knows he's losing and doesn't have any good options left. It's not the behavior of a strong leader who's confident in his position. It's the behavior of someone who's cornered and lashing out because he can't accept the reality of his situation. That perception matters enormously in politics because nobody wants to follow or support someone who appears weak and desperate. Trump's entire brand was built on projecting strength, success, and the ability to win against any opponent. Watching him lose control in a courtroom and resort to threatening judges completely undermines that brand and makes him look pathetic rather than powerful. The acceleration of Trump's legal risk that results from this incident is going to make future hearings and trials even more pivotal and potentially explosive. We're now in a situation where every single court appearance becomes a high-stakes drama, where everyone is watching to see if Trump can maintain composure or if he's going to have another outburst. That's an enormous amount of pressure that's only going to make things worse. Trump doesn't perform well under sustained pressure when he can't control the narrative or intimidate his opponents. Courts are environments where Trump has no real power. He can't bully judges the way he bullied contractors or political rivals. He can't use his media platform to change the facts of what happened. He can't rely on loyal supporters to bail him out of legal jeopardy. He's just another defendant who has to follow the rules and accept the authority of the court, which is something Trump has never been good at doing. The more cornered he feels, the more likely he is to lash out in ways that make his situation worse. We could be looking at a spiral where each legal setback triggers worse behavior, which triggers more sanctions and restrictions, which makes him feel even more desperate, which triggers even worse behavior. It's a vicious cycle that could end with Trump completely melting down in public in ways that destroy whatever remaining political support he has. Here's the bottom line as we wrap up this analysis of what might be Trump's single biggest legal and political mistake. Threatening a federal judge isn't just bad strategy or poor judgment. It's potentially criminal conduct that could result in immediate consequences and long-term damage that's almost impossible to repair. Trump has now demonstrated to every judge, prosecutor, and legal observer that he doesn't respect the judicial system and is willing to cross lines that even defendants accused of serious crimes usually know better than to cross. The panic among his allies and legal team is completely justified because there's no good way to spin or defend this behavior. You can't blame it on political persecution when you're the one making threats in open court. You can't claim you're being treated unfairly when you're openly defying and threatening the people who are supposed to be impartially administering justice. The incident exposes Trump to immediate sanctions, including contempt charges that could be filed within days. It makes every future legal proceeding more difficult because judges are going to be on high alert and less willing to give Trump any benefit of the doubt. It accelerates the collapse of his political support because even die-hard Republicans are going to have trouble defending threats against federal judges. It reinforces every negative narrative about Trump being unfit, dangerous, and a threat to rule of law and democratic institutions. And perhaps most importantly, it demonstrates that Trump has completely lost the ability to control himself under pressure, which means we're likely to see more incidents like this as his legal situation continues to deteriorate. The courtroom meltdown and threats against a sitting judge represent a point of no return in Trump's legal battles. This is the moment where any possibility of negotiated resolutions or lenient treatment evaporated completely. From here on out, Trump is going to face the full force of the justice system without the protections or flexibility that might have been available if he'd maintained even basic respect for the process. We're watching the final stages of a spectacular political and legal collapse, and this incident is going to be remembered as one of the key moments when Trump's fate was sealed. The consequences are going to ripple through every aspect of his remaining legal battles and will likely define how history remembers his post-presidency years. Keep watching this story because the fallout is only just beginning, and what happens next could determine whether Trump faces accountability that's been decades in the making or somehow manages to escape consequences one more time. Based on everything we've seen so far, though, the smart money is on Trump having finally crossed a line that even he can't talk or threaten his way back from.